Our second inductee today is Lieutenant General Susan Helms. Helms has logged 5,064 hours in space and holds the world record for the longest spacewalk at 8 hours and 56 minutes. I got that right? She's a veteran of 5 space shuttle missions. From March to August 2001, Helms became the first woman to live and serve aboard the International Space Station as a member of the Expedition 2 crew. During that mission, Helms and her crew welcomed the first space tourist. After a 12-year career with NASA that included 211 days in space, Helms returned to the United States Air Force in July 2002. In January of 2011, she became commander of the Joint Functional Component Command for Space and 14th Air Force. Let's take a look now at some highlights of her career.
Most of the time trying to see orbit.
Susan Helms on the left, Jim Voss on the right, soon to become space station crew members.
Hey, just please go to the airlock.
Make your touchdown.
To present Susan Helms for induction into the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame, please welcome Hall of Fame astronaut and NASA Administrator Charles Bolden.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Welcome. Probably the happiest person here right now, at least based on the look on his face, is Susan's dad over there. It's incredible watching him as we go through this ceremony. It's an incredible honor for me this afternoon to introduce to you one of my heroes, Lieutenant General Susan J. Helms, United States Air Force. John's already told you much about her official Air Force and NASA careers. Selected by NASA in January 1990, Susan became an astronaut in July 1991. She flew on STS-54 in 93, STS-64, 1994, STS-78, 1998, STS-101, 2000, and served aboard the International Space Station as a member of the ISS Expedition 2 crew in 2001. A veteran of 5 flights, she's logged over 5,000 hours in space, including a world record EVA of 8 hours and 56 minutes, as John just talked about. Her incredible talent and leadership ability became quite evident to me during her first flight, STS-54, on which she served as an IV or intervehicular crew member with responsibility for overseeing the conduct of the spacewalk on that flight. Having trained as an IV crewman myself, I watched in awe as she set the standard for IV crew members by the manner in which she perfectly and deftly choreographed the spacewalk. Under her direction, we learned many lessons that would later prove key to construction of the International Space Station. But enough of the technical side of Susan. Let me share with you some of the jewels of her life from family and friends. Susan enjoys piano and other musical activities, jogging, traveling, reading, computers, and cooking. Although Susan will tell you she doesn't have time to cook anymore. I remember when she checked into the Astronaut office. She joined the band Max Q, singing lead vocals and playing keyboard. And I'll have to tell you, for anyone who's ever heard Max Q, her addition to the band really helped bring them into the realm of playing real music. Susan is one of 4 sisters, daughters to retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Pat and Dory Helms, who reside in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Hall of Fame class of 2001 is not only an all-Air Force class, in case you didn't notice it, but it consists of 2 members who can claim firsts from the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Bo Bobko, as you've already heard, was a member of the first graduating class of the Academy in 1959. And Susan was one of 97 women to survive from a class of 157 women to graduate from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1980, the first class to ever graduate women from the Academy. According to her mom and dad, Dory and Pat Helms, and this is a quote, Susan is the oldest of 4 daughters and was well-behaved, quiet child. She taught herself to read early, and Dory says, I think the Dr. Seuss books and other books that were being read to her helped. But she was 6 when I first took her to a public library. I remember her standing in the middle of a room full of books and asking me 2 questions. How many books may I take home? And when I've read all the books in this room, may I start over? As a teenager, her main extracurricular interests were in the music field. Susan was a percussionist in the band and a pianist for the swing choir. However, in the fall of her senior year, she read in the October 1975 Parade magazine that they had opened the U.S. Air Force Academy to women and decided she wanted to apply. It was okay with her mom and dad, though somewhat of a surprise. She had the grades and the leadership skill, but according to them, she really wasn't a jock. She just told us, or told them, that she would need to get in shape, and that she did. Her father, Pat, who took on the task, recalls that her first mile of running took 16 minutes. That's pretty good for me. I don't know about the rest of you. I would love to have a 16-minute mile today. But when the time arrived for the necessary physical test in January, she was doing an 8-minute mile, and that day did her first ever pull-up. Hearing this story of Susan's conditioning makes it easier for me to understand the story told to me by her sister Nancy. As the story goes, and this is a quote, while visiting our family in 2004 or 2005, Susan asked if we minded if she took our dog, a beagle named Radar, then 6 years old, out for a jog. Of course we agreed. My husband and I laughed and laughed while they were gone about whether Susan would be able to keep up with the dog. About 40 minutes later, Susan and Radar returned from their run, and we asked how it went. In typical Susan fashion, she said, fine. Well, apparently Radar had a different story. He returned from the run and lay down on his bed. Radar didn't get up for 2 days. We had no idea that Susan was so fit. She outran the dog. Now, I personally love this story of Radar, and I must admit that it ended much, much better than I ever imagined as I was reading it, because every time I knew Susan, she was always in really good shape. And so while we were in the astronaut office together, as I was reading the story, I expected to read that Susan would return holding the dog's dying body in her arms after she had run it into the ground. The good thing is, the story ended a lot better than that. Susan, with Mother's Day coming up tomorrow, your mom wanted me to add how special it was when you once wished her Happy Mother's Day from space. She also says, I'll cry here. She also says one of the biggest surprises of her life was during your spacewalk on March 11th, 2001, when you paused and wished a happy 68th birthday. In her words, and I quote, "Doesn't get any better than that." Susan continues to amaze us, and we love her dearly. Sister Margie Helms Carish also reflects on what a very talented musician you are. She told me of the day when you were kids and your dad took the four girls to the movie Young Frankenstein. When we came home, Susan sat down at the piano and started to play the music from the movie by ear. I thought to myself, that's just not normal. She was also the piano player in the Debonaires, her high school musical ensemble, and she loves the show Glee. Also, Susan, Janet, Nancy, and I are very close, and in some combination have traveled quite a bit together over the years. Many trips to Las Vegas without the husbands and kids, several trips to meet in Paris, lots of trips to New York City, but the first trips were with my parents, traveling across the United States as Dad went to helicopter training before his time in Vietnam. Dory, you'll need to tell Margie that he was actually going to B-52 training. Just a little difference. Margie continues, we took our big green station wagon and drove from Massachusetts to California, stayed 4 months, and returned. We have many family memories along the way. Sister Nancy Stutzman tells of the time Susan was living on the ISS when Dennis Tito, the first space tourist that you've already heard about, was preparing to go to space. There's quite a bit of political commentary about it down here on Earth as to whether it was a good idea. Should the Russians be allowed to sell seats on the Soyuz? It was all over the news. Nancy says Susan was on station, and so she didn't have access to the plethora of news commentary. So she asked her how she felt about Dennis Tito coming to space. Nancy says she'll never forget. Susan said, while I'm living on the space station, if anybody knocks at the door, we're inviting them in. Sister Janet Helms Hansen reflects, and this is a quote, I just want to emphasize how much as a family we enjoy each other. My parents instilled in us at a very young age how important family is. We have all made an effort throughout the years to be at Susan's many accomplishments. However, on the flip side, Susan has also made efforts to be at our accomplishments as well. She's a wonderful sister and a wonderful friend. There's a saying that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. I think all of us would choose each other as friends and family. From talking with your family members, Susan, one thing is very, very clear. They all brag how amazing a person you are. Most of all, how amazing you make them all feel they are to you. I'll just share a few more thoughts before I sit down from one of your dear friends, Lisa Reed, who has to take credit for training both of us. Lisa is here to celebrate with you and your family this very special weekend. And according to Lisa, Susan was a standout, even as a new astronaut candidate. That's the term. And she had this reputation for coming into training having done all her prep work or homework, and came to and I'm going to give you some acronyms here, okay? The SST, SMS, SES, and MDF. That's the Single System Trainer, Shuttle Mission Simulator, Shuttle Engineering Simulator, and the Manipulator Development Facility. Did I get them right? Woo-hoo! She always came into those sessions armed with knowledge and lots of pointed questions. The instructors appreciated her preparation, but many times we were the ones who left with crew questions to answer and get back to her. So it's fair to say that while she was a student, her instructors ended up learning more from all the questions they researched. Susan spent years off and on traveling to Russia to train for ISS mission and learning Russian language. Many people never saw her dedication to preparation for this mission. The Expedition 2 training schedule was fully packed with little room for studying Russian. She would set the alarm and get up at 3:30 to get her Russian language study time in. By the time she flew, she was pretty fluent. Lisa also relates that Susan loved her time on the ISS, but being a rabid X-File fan, she fretted over how she was going to get to see the episodes she would be missing weekly while on board. Luckily for her, her support team was able to record them. And when either a shuttle or a Progress mission was there, she relished the chance to watch all the episodes at once and then trade emails with her X-File friends watching on Earth. This past January 2011, as John has already said, Susan Helms was promoted to Lieutenant General and assumed duties as Commander, 14th Air Force, Air Force Space Command, and Commander, Joint Functional Component Command for Space, U.S. Strategic Command. With this milestone in her life, this daughter of a career Air Force pilot, Lieutenant General Helms became the first woman and astronaut to take command at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to present my hero and my friend, Lieutenant General Susan Helms.
And now the presentation of the Hall of Fame medal.
Boy, Charlie, you really got to me there. That is some real research. And you all don't know this, but there's a television that's behind this table up front, and we can see what you're seeing on the forward screens. And I know my hair is all over the place. But then I thought, in space it was all over the place anyway, so it's probably appropriate. I just can't control it. But in any case, I'm going to take a page from Bill's book. Bill said that it takes thousands to build a space shuttle program, and I'm going to tell you that it takes thousands to build an astronaut. And so all I want to do here, because there's not much more to say, is to just thank the people that basically got me here in this point of recognition, which, by the way, I'm so very thankful to the foundation and the committee for picking me for this. It truly is a humbling honor, and I admire all of you so very much. It is quite surreal to stand up here among these giants on the stage and the others who are part of them that aren't here today, and to be welcomed into this. It is kind of a speechless moment, really, and I want to thank all of you. It's upon your shoulders, of course, that we are all standing in this younger generation I'm a part of, but we would not be where we are today in space without all of you doing what you have done. So please, a round of applause for all of you. And that was my first thank you. I will give you my next one. I will name a couple of names. When I was a kid, I loved math and science, and I loved the Air Force. And of course, you're all probably wondering, joining the Air Force probably wasn't, it was a no-brainer, but the question was, what about the astronaut part? And so I would like to thank Dick Covey, who isn't here today, but when you think of who it was that probably got me really sparked to go ahead and put my application in for the program, it was him. He actually came up to me and said, why don't you apply to the program? And until that moment, till he said that, I didn't ever think I would be competitive for the program. And so because of him, I really did get incentivized to go ahead and submit my application. And little known to me, he was on the selection board. When I showed up a few months later, he was one of 12. He didn't have the only vote. But Charlie, you were on that selection board too, if I recall. It was a fun experience. But really, Dick was the one that sort of got this ball rolling. And when we showed up, the senior astronauts, by that time, there There were a few folks left from the Apollo program, but they were primarily the shuttle astronauts at the time I got there in 1990, and I have to thank them. They set basically a standard of excellence in all that we do, and nowhere was that more evident in how they tried to mentor us younger astronauts as we got ready for the shuttle flights than to think back on my rookie flight with my crew members, who are all not rookies, one of whom is here today, Don McMonagle. And if any of you know Don McMonagle, you'll know that he is a man of perfection and knows what the standard really is in order to do this kind of business. And so all of the astronauts who were in the office mentoring us new folks, and Don, you and the rest of the folks on 54 that mentored me on, that's what really drove me to come into the training team and ask all those hard questions, was the astronauts behind me on my crew saying, this is the level you have to know things. And now let's see if you can figure out if the training team knows them too. So it was a great dynamic to be a part of. The training teams, I'll mention them. They're part of the thousands it takes to build an astronaut. You already heard that Lisa Reed is here today. There are other folks, I'm sure, in the audience that are here today. The training teams, very thankless job. They're dealing with the astronaut prima donnas that we are. Everybody thinks it's all about us. It's not. It's about the program, and it's about the great adventure. But the reason that we look so good at what we do is because we were trained that way. And so the folks who do all of the payload integration, all of the work with us to interface to the space shuttle, all of the training for us, they're the ones that do build us into what we are and make us look good. And so I want to thank all of the folks who were a part of that. I do have to throw in a thank you to Hoot Gibson. He's the one that really was the impetus of me joining Max-Q. And so Hoot, now I know why. He thought it would raise the level of the band, and that was what mattered. But he was definitely, with the other Max-Q band members, and including Carl Waltz, my dear friend, basically they showed what it meant to not only work hard, but to play hard. And so I think Max-Q was one of those things in the astronaut band where that was our way of, after working so very hard, we just got together and we played music together, and that was playing hard too. And the byproduct that we were actually able to book a few gigs was a neat byproduct. But when I look back on it, I think that when you're an all-astronaut band, everybody's going to tell you you're playing pretty good. And so I always wondered about that after, but it was a great thing to be a part of, and of course Hoot had a hand in that as well as the others. And then I do have to mention Bob Cabana, because after flying several flights, you know, the office does the flight assignments, and then this moment came where I was no longer a part of a mature program at that point in the 90s called the Space Shuttle. But me and a few others were basically identified by Bob Cabana, who was chief of the office at that time, to go do what astronauts need to do at times, which is to go and start up a new space program. A lot of the folks you see here, they were part of the early days of the shuttle program and the moon program, and in Scott's case, even earlier. And me and a few others were selected to be a part of the space station program, and Bob made that choice. And at the time, we didn't know it, but I've told him this since. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever had the chance to do, which was to be a part of a space outpost in space. That truly was a human adventure that has no equal. And I want to thank Bob for making that decision to put me and a few others in that position. We worked hard to get that program stood up and operating in the right way, and I think we succeeded. But that leads to my final thank yous, and that's those folks that I basically flew with, all of the crew members that I flew with. I drew more from them than they ever drew from me. And frankly, I think the reason I'm standing here before you right now is because of all the love and support of the fellow members of my flights that I flew with, and the teams that basically made us all become as good as we were. And then there's, of course, one obvious thank you I haven't mentioned yet, and that's my family. I'm debating whether to thank them now after what Charlie said, but but the bottom line is everything that they've said has been bringing me to tears just thinking about it. But it is true what he said, certainly, which is that my family means everything to me. My mom, my dad, my 3 sisters, and all of my extended family. And that when I was on space station, those many months, and I remember thinking, I've got to be in one of the most amazing places a human being can ever be, in this really grand adventure, looking at Earth, which is so very, very beautiful from afar. It hit me at that point that if you don't have family and keep tied to family, it really doesn't mean all that much. And so I want to thank my family always for being there and supporting me, because truly I'm who I am because of who you are. So thank you very much. And again, thanks very much to the committee and the foundation for honoring me. It truly is a humbling moment for me. And nothing, in the bottom of my heart, nothing will surely be able to be said that tells you how much this means. Thank you.
Congratulations, Susan Helms, and welcome to the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame.